I recall a time when I was homeless. It was a warm summer night. I was standing on a hill in Portland overlooking the Willamette River. I could see the bright lights of the city in the distance. As a warm breeze blew over me, I remember thinking I had no responsibilities, no expectations, nowhere to be. I answered to no one. No one could even find me if they wanted to. And although I was high on meth at that moment, I felt as free and as happy as I had at any other moment in my life. Drugs or not, that feeling of happiness was real, but it certainly wasn't appropriate. I lived in a tent. I had little safety, no food, no money. I had to steal to survive. I should have felt anxious. I should have felt afraid. But with meth washing my brain in dopamine, I instead felt happy and content. Feeling happy and content will not motivate someone to change their life, whereas anxiety and fear have a far greater value than most give them. Feeling happy all the time is unsustainable and unrealistic. I'd also argue it is undesirable. When welcomed, anxiety and fear can improve your life, change your circumstances. Often in the morning, I wake up feeling anxious and afraid of my day ahead. Perhaps it's a hangover from my life on the streets. What helps me, though, is knowing that these feelings can be the reason I will change my life for the better. American author Gretchen Rubin said, "Action is the antidote to anxiety." Such realizations make feelings of anxiety and fear not only tolerable, but worthy of embrace. I'm Matthew the Peer, your host. On our podcast today, I'm speaking with Ernie Grindle. I know Ernie from an AA group that he and a few others started called The Hang. The meeting is unorthodox. It doesn't read the 12 steps, it doesn't read the 12 traditions, it doesn't recite the Serenity Prayer, and there's no mention of a higher power. In fact, aside from the 7th tradition, it is unstructured in every way, lending itself to the free and open conversation among its members. The meeting is very interesting and unique, and so is Ernie. I hope you enjoy our discussion.
Where am I going to be at?
Sit right there.
Over here?
Yeah.
Oh, this is nice.
Not so bad, huh? So, how should I introduce you? You are Ernie G?
Ernie Grindle.
Ernie Grindle, all right.
Everybody knew my name when I was drinking.
Yeah, I know. I find that true, actually. It's like people are so worried. Oh, I don't want them to know I'm going to treatment. It's like, why? You just need to care.
Well, I want people, and also people in the meetings. I've had people that have heard me mention my last name, and they're like, "Oh my God, I think I know your family." And I was, well, if you drank, you definitely knew my family. It's generational.
So then family definitely. It's like.
Are we going? Right? Are we live? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You want me to just?
Well, I guess go back to the beginning.
Okay.
How did it all start for you? You know, just your.
My just getting comfortable in here is all. My family on my dad's side, like I said, it's generational. My grandparents on my dad's side made and sold bathtub gin on the west side of Vancouver in the 30s and 40s.
Make moonshine? Or
Bathtub gin.
I don't know what that is, but
I don't either. I've
horrible.
never drank bathtub gin. People say, so they were criminals, and I say no, they were entrepreneurs. You know, they had there were 10 kids in my dad's family, 8 boys, 2 girls, and then my grandparents. I never met my grandfather. He died while I was in vitro, and my grandmother I knew until I was, I don't know, in kindergarten or something like that. But they did whatever it took to raise 10 kids, and then the 8 boys were workers, but they were also like a force unto themselves, you know. And they all drank, and even the 2 girls, but they gave it up early on. The women in my family were the force behind the throne. The men were the chaos, and the women were in charge. My grandmother was in charge. Now, out of my dad's 10, out of the 10 siblings, there's only one left, my Aunt Carol, and I refer to her as the matriarch of the clan. She's going to turn 81 next month, and when there was still a family to speak of, you ran things through them. You know, and if there was a dispute, when my Aunt Laura was still alive, she was the oldest girl, she would summon you to her house if somebody had a beef with you in the family, and you went there, and she'd
settle it, huh?
She'd settle it, yeah. And if it didn't settle in your to your satisfaction, then maybe you just kept doing what you were doing anyway and just avoided her for a few months because her wrath was terrible. But so my dad married my mom. She already had 5 kids from a previous marriage. She was taken off the farm at 15 by a guy that, looking back now, was probably a semi-pedophile. He was like 25. Met her when she was on the farm out in Battleground, out in Hawkinson. And he was an alcoholic. And my mom not. And then she divorced him. And like I say, she had 5 kids from him. And then she met my dad and married him. And they had me. And the early years of my growing up are the memories, the most stark memories are my dad coming home drunk. He was a logger, and he would come home drunk. My mother would not be happy that he came home drunk. There would be sullen silence for a while until it just became too much for him to bear, and then he would start smashing things. He was the boogeyman at our house.
And how old were you
when this was going on?
Yeah.
Preschool and into grade school. And then he got sober when I was like 8, 9, 10, someplace around there. He got sober through the program. And I remember them going to the old Alano Club over in Portland for Saturday night dances and stuff like that. And things calmed down a little bit, but it was still a very dysfunctional house. We lived in a upper middle class neighborhood, and we did nothing to fit in. My dad was a logger. Everybody else wore suits to work, and here we are. And then when he was drinking, he'd come home and park on the lawn. Sometimes he'd pass out in the truck. Sometimes he'd pass out on the sidewalk on the way to the front door. Not a lot of lawnmowing or lawn care getting done. I mean, it was obvious who and what we were, and so I grew up in chaos, and I grew up being different than everybody else. And then they divorced when I was 12, and by then my 3 oldest sisters, they had already left home. My 2 brothers, they bailed and went during the chaos of the divorce, and it was very chaotic. My dad did not go down easy. Because he started drinking as soon as the divorce proceedings started. He threw the whole program out the window and went back to drinking. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mom having a date during the divorce proceeding times, and my dad catching them at the front door as they were coming back to our house and tackling the guy to the ground and holding a butcher knife to his throat.
Jeez.
Yeah. So my mom, to escape that, decided to move to California, and I was the last one left at home. So we moved to Stockton, California, and for her, that was her dream. For me, it was a nightmare. Stockton was and is a complete shit show. I've still got some relatives down there that ended up down there because of our move. My oldest sister, Charlotte, moved down there with her 2 kids, and now I've got a niece that still lives down there, and she has kids and grandkids. She'll never leave that town because she went there young enough to where now that's home to her. But, so that's where I started getting into trouble, running with gangs, mostly just for protection.
This is down
in Stockton, California. One guy alone was not a good idea. And I didn't drink or use down there. And I left home at 15, came back up here, and that's when the drinking and the using started. Started with pot. I got a job, lied about my age, got a job in an industrial plant, and I was working with a bunch of genuine 70s hippies, 60s and 70s hippies, and for them smoking pot at lunch was just, it's the same as eating a bologna sandwich, you know. And once I broke the barrier, nothing was off limits. Meth wasn't a thing back then, but occasionally cocaine, pot for sure, alcohol, eventually acid.
I just can't get good acid anymore, though. It seems like back then
they had visuals. Back then, you actually saw things that you had to do it in a group so you could ask somebody, "Are you seeing that?" Because if you're seeing it also, then we're going to address it. But if we're not, then I'm going to let it go because it's probably not there.
This is what decade? What, 70s?
78, 79.
Okay.
Yeah. got into a crew, me and my oldest brother Dennis. Me and my brother Dennis were, and then my brother Ken, all he was doing was kicking out babies, but he was an alcoholic also, but he wasn't doing the things that my brother and I were doing, that Dennis and I were doing. And at 17, saw him die from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to his chest, 5 feet from me. We'd been doing pharmaceutical speed for like 3 days. His wife had left him. I didn't know any of that was going on. To me, it was just another drunken melee. But house was surrounded by cops, trying to talk him into putting the gun down, and finally he just ended it. He was 22, and that was my first instance of anything like that.
That's incredible. Why did he make you bear witness to it? Oh my God.
Normal's whatever you become accustomed to, and we were, I mean, from onset, almost from birth, we were born to chaos.
Yeah, you just think it's...
Chaos is just what it was, yeah.
Sounds horrific.
Yeah, it was. And stuff like that sticks with you, I'm sure. I know it did with me. And then just roll down the years, drinking, using, marginal jobs.
Was it hard, do you think, to have a healthy family as an adult?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's kind of a dumb question.
Well, it's pretty hard to find somebody that sees your normal as their normal.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, Shannon, who's now 40, and a normie. Her mother was an alcoholic, but when I was with her, her mother's been dry. She never worked a program or anything, but she just quit drinking. She'd been dry for some time, so.
What the program calls a heavy drinker, makes a distinction.
Yeah, but I knew her back in the day, and in my professional opinion, he smiled as he said, I would say that she is an alcoholic, but she was just able to quit and never go back to it.
Did you have that kind of dry drunk thing they talk about?
Her?
Yeah.
Yeah, her. I mean, just because her normal wasn't like my normal didn't mean that her normal wasn't as completely, in its own way, as fucked up as mine. She came from a chaotic background as well, so that meshed pretty good.
Sometimes I feel the reason why people drink or use is not even that they want to be drunk or high, but they just can't bear being sober.
Yeah.
It's just painful.
I've talked about in meetings, I've referred to it as blotting out the obvious.
Yeah, you're pretty involved with the program, aren't you? I mean, it seems like. I mean, you don't strike me as like an AA warrior or anything.
I'm not some guru guy. No, I've been with the same home group for 17, 18 years, and I opened the doors for 6 or 7 years of that. Before I finally I still have a key because I take sponsees to the room. We have our own room. I take them there to work the steps. So with that, I'm involved. We're a sponsorship group, and we believe firmly in sponsoring. And we don't just give somebody a book and send them home. We sit down. If we're going to sponsor somebody, we take some time. So I'm in that. And then the hang, and that just stemmed from the fact that I really don't like AA meetings.
You and me both. Oh my God! I've gotten sober, and I can't just say that AA didn't get me sober, because I certainly got sober in those rooms, or while I was drying out,
Mm-hmm.
for a couple of years. AA was where I did it, and I think really, like the whole higher power thing and this and that. I think, I get it. I mean, it's worse things than. I'd rather love Jesus and be a drunk. You know what I'm saying? And I can get a lot of people while they're doing that. But it's always been a very hard thing being, an atheist or a Buddhist. Which atheist,
You're a Buddhist?
Yeah. And,
I know a few Buddhists in the program.
Yeah. And so but Buddhism at its core is very atheistic. It doesn't even talk about it. As far as a creator God, a sentient higher being, it's there in the world. But Man, it sure seems to work for a lot of people, you know.
It did for me for a long time. When I got sober in 94 and was sober till 05 without, I mean, I went to the AA meetings and did service work and kind of sponsored people, but didn't work a very good program, and I was insane the entire time. But having said that, that was my choice of higher powers. Was we often attended church. We had when my marriage broke up, and then eventually I ended up going out. We were involved at a church out in Ridgefield, and they were like grooming me to be a deacon. But
Really?
and then in this recovery, which started on May Day of '08. I've been a member of a church before, but in the last 3 years, I've kind of come around to a different kind of spiritual awakening.
Mhm.
I kind of view my embracing of Christianity as more a result of the indoctrination that my mom gave me. She was a Christian, or I like to think so, whatever a Christian is. And so you just, again, normal's whatever you become accustomed to. So this is God, this is what he looks like, his name is Jesus, and you go, and then as you grow, and I still think that there's something larger than us, but I no longer have the arrogance to think that I know what it is.
Well, and that's easy. I think anyone can see it. Clearly, there's something bigger than me going on. And I think that actually helps a lot because with alcoholics and addicts, but, you know, we'll just stick to alcoholics right now, is that unless there's something bigger than you in the world, that means your problems are as big as the universe, right? Because if there's something more important going on, that means you're the most important thing, you know. And I sense, it's like, I think it's a very good first step to getting over yourself, you know, and stop being in your own head, you know, and just be able to put things in perspective. That you're part of something bigger than just yourself, you know.
Perspective's important.
Yeah.
And perspective, I was thinking about that on the way over here. Perspective is one of the greatest things that I've acquired in this recovery, and certainly in the last 3 years. How big of a problem is this? And it helps that I'm going to be 62 shortly.
Yeah.
Your mortality becomes a lot.
You start thinking about it more, for sure, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing about it, this is the last thing I'll say about a higher power, unless you want to talk about it more in AA. It's like, you know, they say, oh, you know, it's whatever we want it to be. And they'll say things like doorknobs or light bulbs or whatever. But, you know, the thing is like, we all know what higher power they're talking about. In like 1935, when this program started, you know, there only was one higher power. You know, there was no, like, you know, other movements moving into.
If you came in there talking about Buddhism, I don't know what kind of welcome you would have got.
You know, it's like, but
if I came in there in 1935 talking the way that I just talked to you, I don't know what kind of welcome I would get.
And the thing is, and I think really puts me off, and I'm going to kind of segue into the meeting you started real quick and why I actually go there. It's like I think when they actually say the Lord's Prayer, I think that's really a violation of AA principles in a way, you know, because you're basically defining a Catholic prayer written in Rome, you know,
right?
Very, very specific, you know, as far as what a higher power is, and I think it's
the Judeo-Christian God. That's who you're praying to at that time. Yeah.
And
but the big book says you can choose whatever power you want,
you know,
as long as it's this one that goes along with this Catholic prayer.
Well, yeah, but I mean, monotheism. I mean, what else would you have gravitated to? You know, so I get it. And, you know, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing about AA, too, how, you know, all you need is a grudge and a coffee pot, you know, resentment and a coffee pot, you know, and it basically is, well, even when it says in traditions, you know, that basically, you know, a higher power is a group conscience, you know, and I always thought that was very profound, because basically, if the higher power of a group is a group conscience, that means that we are God, you know. It's very clever, not clever, but it's very skillful. You know, so much of it. And
it's still very confusing to me, the whole God thing. Yeah. It is. It's my spirituality is a work in progress.
I do have a Diet Coke and Coke too, if you want one.
Okay, thanks.
Weird. I see you lost some thought there. Still thinking about higher power?
Caroline, my girlfriend, sometimes see me sitting like that. She'll say, "What are you thinking about?" And I will say, "Nothing. Absolutely nothing."
That would be a gift, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess, you know, And certainly, I'm not certainly a typical. Yeah, I know what it is. It's like, but I went to 12 years of Catholic school.
Oh,
So
that's rough.
yeah, my high school was hard. It was a preparatory school, Seattle Prep. And I'm like, man.
Seattle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're on Capitol Hill, but all this talk is worth it to me. If it really kind of touches on, I think the meeting that you started is really unique. It's really novel. Talking the steps, no saying the traditions, no prayer, no serenity prayer. That it's just very. I mean, it's novel for sure. Tell me a little bit about the inspiration you had for that and why you decided to go that way.
It was me and Marcy Kay that started it, and for me it stemmed from, one, my love of podcast. I like having open dissertation. I just like to talk. I want to hear what people think, and it's how we gather knowledge, is by listening to other people. And also because, like I said, I go to a meeting and I get there and habitually I get to meetings half an hour early because I want to hang out and I want to talk and I want to visit. It's the meeting before the meeting. And then just about the time I'm having a good time, a meeting breaks out and it's like, oh, jeez, here we go again, And they serve their purpose, and I get up and I share and I do my part, but I'm tired of AA meetings. I really am. And Marcy, I brought it up to Marcy because Marcy's somebody that I knew would embrace the idea, and we've had some great conversations, and she was like, yeah, let's do it. And we didn't know what to name it. I came up with The Hang, and my reason for coming up with The Hang was totally different than the idea that she had. I said, let's call it The Hang. She said, text me back and said, I don't know, let me work with it and see what it looks like. Well, in the big book, it says we alcoholics must work together and hang together. That's how she saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it as what they call the hang, stand-up comedians. At the end of a show, when they clear out the nightclub or whatever, they lock the door, and they all sit in there and smoke weed and drink and goof on each other, and they call it the hang. And that's what, except for the smoking and drinking, that's what the hang is for me. We're just goofing on each other, I mean, there's serious things that happen in there. And I'm sure there are in the comedians hang. And I'd like to see the conference. It's a lot like me that I've mentioned this to Marcy, it hasn't gone as far as I want it to go. And she asked me when I told her that, she said, well, if this is as far as it goes, is that good enough? Can you stand that? And I was like, yeah, I can stand it just the way it is, but I want more. I want more out of it. I'd like to have a big enough area to where we could break off into separate conversations, and we're starting to do that. We get like 2 or 3 conversations going sometimes. Mm-hmm. Somebody up by the desk, 2 or 3 people by the desk, 2 or 3 people in the middle of the main area, and then we've got towards the door, we'll get a conversation going on over there. And it feels like we can solve something, but I don't know that. And it's evolved. I think I made a mistake early on. I started posting topics on Facebook in the middle of the week for what we were going to talk about. Mm-hmm. That was my own screw up. That wasn't what I wanted. I don't know why I did that. But
so would you say you're lucky to be alive? I think most people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. What's your closest near-death experience you've probably ever had?
I've been in 3 fast roll car wrecks in my life. One of them, I flew out of the vehicle at the last second, just before the last roll, and on the last roll, it rolled onto me. I thought I was dead then. I really did. If we hadn't been in sand, the sand, as opposed to asphalt or hard ground, probably I would have been crushed.
And this is what you're drinking and driving, or someone else was drinking and driving?
Somebody else was drinking and driving. We were in a Jeep, 4-wheeling, and we were doing cookies at a high rate of speed, and none of us were wearing seatbelts. There were 4 of us in it. This other buddy of ours was in another vehicle. He was also doing cookies, and he said he came out of a spin, and he saw us upside down flying through the air about 10 feet up in the air. And he said when we landed, it looked like a bomb went off. The 2 guys in the back flew out, beer cans, a bong. Me and the driver, he had the steering wheel to hang on to. I had the jockey bar to hang on to, and we had a full roll cage. And we rode it all the way till, like I say, the end, and then I fell out, and it landed on me. And so that was pretty close. I've had guns pointed at me in anger 3 times as a result of the life that you live when you drink and use and live on the fringes. I want to think that probably that wreck was probably the closest.
And when you say use, when you talk, what
Methamphetamine is
yeah.
as early as methamphetamine. I mean, meth's been around since I just recently saw somewhere that the Nazis used it for their soldiers.
They did. It was called Ruby. Ruby. Yeah.
So it's been around a minute, but when I first noticed it was in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, and they're thinking one of the reasons why the stormtroopers,
Why they were so effective.
Why they were so effective in the Blitz. They thought they're all on meth.
Yeah, and then they had a few instances where they started killing their own officers because that stuff's off the hook, man.
Oh yeah, it's craziness. And I bet you, all the psychotic stuff that Hitler did, 10-1, I bet you it was a meth psychosis.
I think he was. I think he was definitely. I've seen some pictures of him where his eyes look like mine looked back in the day. If you stay awake for 4 or 5 days, you reevaluate everything.
Oh yeah, I mean,
what's important?
Meth, man. When it comes to talking about meth and my meth use, I don't even know where to start. Really, it seems like a nightmare.
How long have you been off meth?
6, 7 years.
The same as your clean or dry date for alcohol?
Well, the thing was, I started doing meth because it's like when I did meth, I didn't drink myself to death. I couldn't drink it. And I thought, man, meth might have a bad reputation, but it's got to be better than drinking myself to death. And sure enough, then when I stopped doing meth, I started drinking myself to death again. If I had a drink, I'd end up in the emergency room in like about 2 weeks. Because it's not just like drink. Okay, I mean, you drink all night. And if at 2 o'clock, I couldn't get more beer, I would just sit all night and just stare at the clock. Literally, just stare at the clock until it was 6 o'clock hit. I'd go across the street, steal more booze. If they left the cabinet open, I'd grab a bottle, and but always just. It was funny. At one point, I went over there to steal the malt liquor that I'd been drinking all the time, and that space where it was stored was actually just empty. They just left just a blank room. It's like, well, we know it's leaving the store, but we ain't selling it. But that was the worst. Until I got homeless, I never stole anything in my life. But
how long were you homeless?
2 years, maybe just shy.
Here or Seattle?
Portland.
On the streets?
Oh yeah, living in a tent. Sure, hardcore homeless. Yeah.
And we talked about this the other day. I told you that's something that's really interests me. It fascinates me, that lifestyle.
Oh my God, it's crazy. It's insanity. I mean, I go down there and I'll talk to some of the merchants and I go, "How's the homeless situation?" They're like, "Oh, it's so much worse," and it's not. It's not worse. They say the count's higher, but it's not worse. I mean, when I was out there, I'm for a half mile to a mile, it'd be nothing but tents, one next to the other, just off the sidewalk. I'm like,
there are places where it's like that.
Oh yeah, but Vancouver is places to hide a little bit more. It's not quite so dense an urban area, So if they are around here, I mean, they kind of go up in the bushes a little bit, But no, I mean, it was. I had to keep myself busy, I was hustling,
That's what I see with a lot of what I would call successful homeless people. Is they're always up to something.
No, yeah, I was a stealing fool. Like, I mean, I was a menace. And like, all day just stealing shit and selling it because I had my meth habit and my wife's meth habit to support, and I always had nice clothes on.
Did you utilize because Portland has a reputation for being pretty free with city funds did you utilize all that?
No.
Were they not doing that at that time?
Not so much, but even if they had it, I didn't need to. I had all the food and stuff I wanted. I mean, I was really good. Maybe it was being a theater major or something like that is what helped me, but I mean, stealing it's stressful. It's traumatic. You have to steal for a living, And I mean, I was hungry, and I needed shelter, and I had my wife to take care of, and she couldn't leave the freaking tent because it's so dangerous. And there's a few other stories there too, but yeah, there was a Fred Meyer where I stole most of my food and and Shelter Supplies from
Northwest.
It's one there. Northeast. There's a Fred Meyer, and I probably took that for. I probably took that Fred Meyer for $35,000 shit in like 2 years. You know?
Entrepreneur.
I used to wheel that. I used to wheel that cart out, man. It was like the thing. It's crap. The shit would just be falling out. Those are going out the doors, and and the thing, the cart would lock up, right? You know, once you put out the door. But what I do is I grab a cart and I go backwards through a checkout aisle that wasn't open, you know, and that would unlock the wheel. So then I just rattle that thing. I would always steal like high-end bikes, you know, like they'd be $1,000, $2,000 bikes. I just wheel them out the back door, and they never knew they were gone. But that's where I'm going with this. Hopefully, I don't sound like I'm bragging, but it was once where I didn't have a cart and a bike to throw it all in and bike back. So I wheeled that cart out of the Fred Meyer's, and you can't get past the parking lot, right? Because they got little magnetic strips or whatever that'll lock up the wheel, so you can't push the thing out the parking lot. So I went through the flower beds and just rolled down an embankment, and then just all fired up on meth. I swear to God, I pushed that fucking shopping cart through the middle of the night, like 2 miles. You know how loud a shopping cart is. Yeah, very loud, man.
And the wheels were locked up?
No. I avoided.
Oh, once you went over the, once you went through the berm.
The flower bed and the stuff. You know, it's like, oh my God. I traded a jump box and some food stamps, and got an old boat trailer because it was getting cold. It's getting about October. First winter was coming. I realized, man, this whole camping in a tent, it's not going to go. So I got this boat trailer, and I started stealing lumber from the construction that was going on, which was a lot actually in that part. It was like near St. Francis, you know, the church there. I want to say it's northeast, but it wasn't Felony Flats. And so I put an 8x10 platform, plywood on there, stole some hand cutting tools, and I built like kind of like this huge structure. It had like a loft for a bed eventually. just like the house that meth built, right? And it had a loft for the bed up there, and a couch underneath, and a little ladder you could crawl up. And I had a gravity feed of 5 gallon buckets, you know, that would feed down gravity feed water and stuff like that. I had a place I could hide because the cops, after a while, you know, Officer Schroeder out there, he became the sergeant, man. He's like, you know, and he'd go, Matt, if I ever see you, I'm going to arrest you. Yeah. And I'm going to arrest everyone that's with you every time until you leave my part of the town. You know.
And that's what they can do is just move. They're still utilizing that. Move them to a different spot.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is like, and you know, in the cops, you can say what you want about them, but I mean, what a mess they have to deal with, you know.
I've talked to some people that work in the. I'm going to throw this out there: the homeless industrial complex that's developed now.
Yeah.
And I asked them how many people. What percentage of the people that you work with have no interest in getting out of what they're in? And I don't want to just throw a number out because I can't remember but it was an astounding number. It's pretty high. It's pretty high. So yeah.
Well, he's like, yeah, and the cops really don't care, you know, if anything bad happens to you, because the way they see it, you know, I'm not. If I ever speak for them, but I mean, the impression I got was that if bad things happen to you, well, good, maybe that would motivate you to get off the street. And, you know, and there seems to be an impression generally with people, like when I walk through the hunting section of a store, and I hear these two, you know, white guys, middle-aged, talking. It's like, well, you know, why would they get off the streets? You know, they eat for free, you know, and you don't have to do anything, you don't have to pay. But I mean, I'd like to see, you know, I'd like to see any of those two guys, you know, and how long they
live that
life. You tell
yeah.
me how easy it is, you know, free peanut butter and jelly sandwiches once a day.
I had a buddy in the program. He just recently passed, and he just passed from just the weaknesses of the flesh. He just, you know, I don't know. I never asked his family what he passed from, but he didn't pass from drinking and using. At the time that he passed, he was actually living in an Oxford house, and something just quit on him. But this guy, his MO was that he would get 6 years or 6 months to a year clean and sober, and then he would go back to the streets because the streets was what he understood. And he told me once, he said, I'm good at it. Mm-hmm. I'm good at it. And, yeah.
Yeah, be vulnerable. The thing is like, you know, like people that go down there, it's like they feel like they're they're at risk going among those communities. But you're not at risk because someone cares if something happens to you, you know. But the reason why such violence is perpetrated on people homeless is like, who's going to protect them? You know, cops can't protect them. Well, won't, you know.
And it's probably homeless on homeless.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's hierarchies out there, you know.
See, I've had a theory about that too.
There's those that kind of feed off the land, so to speak, and then there's those that feed on the people who feed off the land, you know.
There was a camp out in Orchards off of Coxley. It was in a swamp area. The swamp area is still there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many people were living in there, but they had pallets going back into there to walk on, and there were structures like the one you were talking about making back in there.
Mm-hmm.
They had Channel 8 go down there once and did a story on it, and while the lady's doing the talk spot where she's standing in the street, you know, talking gravely about this horrible situation, a fight breaks out behind her with two guys with 2x4s wailing on each other with 2x4s, and they just keep the camera rolling, and she pretends like it's not happening. But I was talking to a buddy of mine, and I said, I bet you there's a strong man in there that keeps order of a sort.
There are certain rules, true. But it seems like during the pandemic, it all went to shit. You know,
that's when I first started noticing it.
You know, it's like it was against the rules. If a homeless person stole from another homeless person, they had a beat down coming. Nothing severe, but definitely, you're gonna get knocked around a little bit. Just to remind you, don't do this. But it's always just, you know, might makes right. You know, but one thing I did is you want to make sure you're worth more alive than dead. You know, and ratting people out to the cops, that was definitely a way to put yourself in great danger. I actually had
in a lot of sub-societies.
Yeah, you know, but it's like they're not like even existing in reality out there. You know, they forget what it is to be. I mean, they can't become deinstitutionalized. You know, and yeah, you know, like meth, particularly meth. I mean, the longer you do it, the farther and farther you move away from reality. You know, like horrible things happen to you. You know, you're very, very vulnerable. You know, particularly like. What's hard is like, you know, with my wife, I'd bring that stuff down and she'd go in psychosis, you know. And I'd have to like, she always thinks I was trying to kill her. That was her thing. You know? And she'd go, but she'd get really confused, you know, and bad things happen, you know. And I'm not saying, you know, I don't want to betray her confidence, but I'm not saying that, you know, my suffering in some of those things was as bad as hers. But it's hard when you're not able to protect your wife, you know. And I was bringing that shit home, you know. But believe me, man, she'd be pissed if I didn't, you know. But still, you know, I was bringing home the agent of really kind of chaos that would lead to some bad stuff happening. And it did. It did, you know. And but it's hard. I mean, unless you're out there, no one would believe it, how insane it is. I mean.
I started in spring 2020. I still had a full-time regular job that I worked. But I started chasing a delivery app over in Portland after work, making Postmates is where I started out, was the name of the company. You get an app on your phone and they say go to this restaurant and pick up this food, take it to this place. And that's when I started seeing, and it was in the middle of the beginning of the pandemic. And Portland really embraced the weirdness because they're weird anyway. They were weird long before the pandemic. And that's when I started seeing what you're talking about, the people in tents, the structures, and then delivering after dark, you know, come fall. Well, I was still doing it after work come fall, and it's 5 o'clock, it's dark out. And the restaurants were all outdoors, and they had tiki torches, and people walking around wearing hooded cowls and stuff like that, and everybody's got a mask on. Mm-hmm. And there's everybody working a scam, and even the people that were not at street level looked dangerous because of the whole masking up thing. And that's when I kind of developed, it was like there's something, I could tell there was something going on here, and it hasn't stopped with the pandemic. It's like
yeah, it is. Some of the changes are permanent. It's a bit more barbaric now than it was. I mean, and it was obviously, it's crazy. I mean, the assault, rape, murder, I mean, all
and
time.
People getting ran over in the streets. People wandering out into traffic.
Yeah, well, and that's just it too. Is like, you know, these people, no one. I guess they're so vulnerable, and this is why this stuff happens to them. Like, you know, it's like, who's going to protect them? And no one out there. You know, if you can't protect yourself, you know, or ally yourself with a particular group, you know, like a street gang or something like that. I had some members of the street gang come after me once. And there's been times definitely I was afraid for my life. But this wasn't one of them. I beat him up with a bat. But I was just so freaking high on meth anyway, you know. It's like, it never even occurred to me that I could die at this very moment, you know. It was like, you know, I felt pretty confident. And that's kind of thing. It's like usually with trauma or PTSD, it's not enough to have something bad happen to you, but you have to feel helpless, you know. You're in a situation, and that really seems to be when it snaps in, you know. My wife, she was agoraphobic for a year when we first got off the streets. She wouldn't leave the trailer. I mean, I had to go out, get all the food, all the water, bring it back, you know. And then we got that puppy, that dog, and that was really kind of the beginning of her healing.
This is, your current wife was your wife then?
Yeah.
See, you guys look pretty normal now. You've come, I mean, look at your apartment and whatnot. You guys, you know, you've come back.
Wow, yeah, it doesn't usually work out that way.
No, it's rare.
No, yeah, very.
I mean,
and to be married all through that. We're married all through it. And,
to stick together.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is just like, you know, and also we're so bonded, you know, before for sure, but now it's like going through, you know, trench warfare together, you know. And I mean, some people would use the word trauma bonded, but I think it's a misuse of that word, you know. But definitely we're the only two that would believe each other completely if we talked about what happened. And there's some stuff I'm changed. I'm a changed man. I'm not the man I used to be, you know. I might be sober now, and I work in a service where I help people, you know, behavioral health and social services. And actually it's to help house the homeless. I mean, that's my day job. But, I mean, I don't like, I have to say, it's just like I don't enjoy my company as much as I used to. I liked myself better when I was just a stupid drunk, you know. But now, you know, sure, other people seem to like me better. They like this version of me more, you know, but it's like, I'm just...
Did they know you then, though?
Well, some. I mean, family. I still have my family. Family still talks to me. That's nice. You know.
Did they still talk to you when you were ripping and running?
They didn't know where I was. They thought I could be dead. What a horrible thing to do to your mother, you know? Live out in the streets and don't call, and, you know, and they don't know where you are, if you're alive or dead, or, you know. I mean, it was traumatic for them, too. And it was incredibly selfish of me, like being an addict is, you know. And my wife and I were diving deep on meth long before we became homeless, you know. And just the fucking insanity, you know.
But that led to the homeless.
Yes. Yeah, it did. Mm-hmm.
Diving deep on meth isn't conducive to in a nice apartment or a house.
You don't show up to work.
Or a mortgage.
You don't know what freaking day it is even, you know. And just the insanity. I mean, God, when it comes to telling stories about it, I don't even know where to start, really. You know, yeah. I mean, it seems like people, like, often I find when they get sober, you know, you realize, oh my God, you know, drugs or alcohol is the least of their problems.
Yeah, that's what I tell my sponsees. The only thing that's going to happen to you on the first day you don't drink is you're not going to drink. The change doesn't happen on that day. You're still that guy that you were yesterday. You're just not drunk or loaded. And that's why I'm kind of adverse to the whole birthday thing. And the last couple of years I've gotten into making a big deal out of my AA anniversary, my recovery anniversary, but mostly I just want to know what you've done to make things different, how you've grown. I know some people with more time than me, without naming any names, that I wouldn't want what they have. There are some people that don't change. And I did that for 10 and a half years during that first bout of sobriety. I didn't change. I was the same guy, except that I wasn't drinking and using, and ended up with me being suicidal at 10 and a half years, and that's when I drank. And I was probably suicidal before then. I just powered through it.
Did you ever get any diagnosis?
Yeah, I have chronic depression with anxiety. And I'm on a very low dose of something or another. And it's manageable. Occasionally, stressful situations, if it goes on for too long, I mean, I can usually motor through it, but if it becomes unrelenting, if it's a situation that's not resolving itself or that I can't resolve, I go into a pretty bad spot for a while. But I haven't thought about drinking in forever. It's not that. It's just that, if anything, what the most self-destructive aspect of it is that I think to myself, if this is how it's going to be forever, if I thought I was going to have to be like this the rest of my life would be very short.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I have a diagnosis. I'm bipolar, and that should be enough, right? But it's just the craziness, It's true, but until you get rid of the drugs and alcohol, you can't really know what's really going on, It's almost like you're self-medicating, for anxiety, you say.
I didn't know I had those two things until they'd been addressed medically, and then normal is whatever you become accustomed to. I had to see the difference between, and really growing up the way I grew up with the chaos in my house, hell yeah, I had depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah. If I wanted them to throw a bunch of letters at me, they would probably come up with PTSD or there were guns. We sat at the dinner table once. I'll tell you this story real quick. 6 of us, 6 kids, and my parents sitting at the dinner table, and my dad been on the whiskey for 2 or 3 days. And he got up and he left the room and he came back and he had his hunting rifle with him, his 30-30, and he sat back down at the table, and and credit to us, we knew where we were at. We knew what our situation was. We just kept eating. Yeah. And eventually he took that rifle and he shot a hole in the wall up near the ceiling. And just blam! And everybody jumped, but then he just leaned it up against the wall and went back to eating. And
just insanity.
That's, if you put kids through that kind of stuff.
It is, yeah.
How are they going to come out?
Well, I wonder too. It's like if family means that kind of chaos, it's almost like I wonder if when you start to make your own family, you generate chaos because you don't think things are normal unless it's there, Or for the very least, you seem to reenact, what you think normal is supposed to be, And why wouldn't you think that's normal, as a kid? You're gonna think whatever's going on, I can't really blame much of my situation on my family, if any. I have a very healthy family. Dad's a lawyer. Mom worked as a nurse. She stayed home and raised the kids. There's no trauma. There's no drugs or alcohol. No. I went to private schools. Had any kind of medical needs met. Always clothed, always fed. And so, but yeah, I still became mentally ill, hopeless drug addict and alcoholic. It's just like as soon as I started realizing I could change the way I feel. I didn't realize how much I didn't like the way I feel until suddenly. Actually, I was in the hospital at 18, and they gave me some pain relievers like Demerol. It was the first time I actually enjoyed the Flintstones. You know what I'm talking about? And like when I realized you could, moderate how you feel about things through
take the edge off
drugs and alcohol. I mean, it was on. I just ate pretty much anything I could find.
How long do you think you've been? You said you were bipolar?
Yeah.
How long do you think?
I was a very miserable child. So clearly I had mood issues then. It's hard to know because I spent most of my adult life, really from like 22, that's when I started drinking and drugging. 21, I'm 20, trying to say 20. I mean, I was always so drunk and high all the time. Who knows what the fuck,
Yeah.
I mean, you can think, and you can say, oh, did the drugs and alcohol really cause it? I don't think so, but when I got basically, when I usually got caught up, I usually would end up in the hospital from a manic episode. It was a precursor to that was just crazy freaking drinking and using, and it was a symptom of bipolar. Definitely the drinking because you're running so hot. You're trying to kind of keep a cap on that. But I mean, yeah. Then he's always spent a week at least, and inside somewhere, inpatient. And come back out, and you lost all your friends, you lost your job. Okay, I didn't lose my family. My first wife, she's a fucking saint. What she had to put up with. I mean, Jesus.
But if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I started to know. I mean, when you end up in the hospital, something's going on. I always knew when my dad showed up at my door and said, "Matt, it's time to go." I knew it. That's usually what ended it, because I trusted him. He was someone I trusted implicitly, and I trusted his judgment implicitly. And if he said I was crazy, yeah, I was crazy.
Thank God.
Yeah.
My first marriage that I was in during that 10.5 years of sobriety. I hate catchphrases like that, but it wasn't recovery. It was sobriety.
He's good at it. Yeah.
She was and is schizoaffective with depression.
That's a hard one.
And they would have her on a cocktail of different meds. And so our phrase for it was, I'd say, I think your meds are going south. And they were stopping. Her behavior would slowly start sliding. I'd come in off the truck. I drove truck locally, but I'd come home at night and like say it's fall and you get home at 6 o'clock, the lights should be on in the house, but they weren't. And she was just sitting there in the dark. And I would be like, oh, fuck, here we go.
Now, this is your wife, you said?
My first wife.
Your first wife, okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. And then eventually I was to her what your dad was to you. I would have to eventually tell her, because going to the hospital terrified her. And it should in some... I'll get back to my point about that. But the treatment sometimes of people with mental disorders in an emergency room or in a clinic or whatever is pretty fucking shameful.
Yeah, they lack certainly some skills.
So she didn't want to go, but I would have to sit her down and say, it's time, because she would indulge in self-harm.
Yeah.
Cutting, burning.
Once it gets to that point,
visual. She'd see things. She tried to jump off of the Fremont Bridge once, and I got to listen to it because she was trying to call me, and the phone got dropped in the car, and it was still on send, and I could hear yelling. I could hear traffic. I could hear rain and wind because it was a rough, windy, weathery night, and then I heard a man yell, her name is blah, blah. Well, apparently that cop had reached into the window and got her ID out of her purse and was yelling to the other officers, this is her name, so that they could, because she was on the edge of the bridge, So I don't know what the fuck's going on. So I called the cops, and cop came and took the report, and at that point there was nothing. There was no reports or anything like that. He said, I'm going to sit out here and do paperwork in front of your house for an hour or so and see what develops. And he came back up 15 minutes later, and he said, they have her over in Portland, and he told me she tried to jump off the Fremont. So that's the kind of stuff that goes with that. And like I said, and I looked at that as I dropped the ball, because I should have seen before it got to, because I was good at seeing when she was at the point. It should never have gotten to a point where she got in the car, said she was going to go grocery shopping, but instead tried to jump off the Fremont Bridge.
Well, I think you can cut yourself a little bit of slack, because it's like when even with addiction, but I think too with mental illness, it's like everyone's sick and rendered powerless, even the people that, because you care for, you love her, so it's almost like the helplessness. It seems to be just part of the dynamic, It's not just the person who's directly suffering from the mental disorder. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but yeah, but the ones that love them, it's like, my wife always felt powerless, And what it gets to really is that suddenly you're not really a spouse. Let's say you're no longer, almost a romantic partner. You become a caretaker, and he loves them, right? So, kind of, I think your love for them, ironically, can keep you from doing what's right by them sometimes.
It came on pretty early on that I was more caretaker than lover. Pretty early into the relationship, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I was pretty flawed, and it came to a point where I just looked at her as just another part of, I drove truck to make money for the family. I mowed the lawn because you can't let it get too long. And when she lost her mind, I drove her to the hospital, and it quit being. It was long before we split up. It wasn't a love situation. It was, and she sensed it and finally, owned it to herself, and the marriage ended. I became pretty condescending towards her.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on me too.
Yeah.
Any relationship that's blown up around me, absolutely, I own a big chunk of it.
Yeah, well, it's hard. I mean, just to say, marriages and stuff like that, I mean, most of them don't work out. It's hard. I tell people, look, you could have done everything right and still not have it work out, It's like, it's just, I mean, it's the exception, what I say, 51% of marriages end in divorce, but if you just do all relationships, But I mean, yeah, I lost my first time I got sober. I was sober for like 2-3 years, and I lost it because I took my eye off that manic ball. My first big manic episode was when I was 27. They gave me an antidepressant because I was a little depressed because I was working in a cubicle in a skyscraper. Go figure, right? And
no natural light or anything.
Yeah, right. And yeah, but that was quite a storm. That first manic episode. I was like, I literally could see through walls, and I thought I was just like reaching enlightenment. It was just going to ascend into the heavens, the pure beam of light kind of crap, And my poor wife, I mean, she really knew it, but she knew something was up, right? When I was on my knees, naked in the kitchen, screaming at Allah, right? Not that I have any Islam. and I saw her, and I reached out my hand to her and said, "Join me, honey. We're both going to ascend to Allah," And she's like screaming, like, "I don't know what the fuck is going on with you,"
That was your first wife?
That was my first wife and first major manic blowout, And but I mean so I probably had some. I probably was still bipolar, but until like 27, until I had that antidepressant. That's really what kicked things into motion. And I have since had manic episodes and hospitalizations, but that did involve necessarily antidepressant. It just because things started to roll, and then for the rest of my life I was a slow. I usually go a year or two, but every manic episode is always followed by a depressive episode. But the manic ones,
the crash comes, right? Always.
Yeah.
And that's not unusual. That's like
it's pretty much
that's
the playbook.
That's the thing.
Playbook,
yeah.
And you can be depressed and manic at the same time. It doesn't just.
The brain is an amazing thing. The stuff that can come up with on its own.
But I mean, it's hard being hospitalized. The nice thing about being in a mental ward is you realize you're not as crazy as some others. You look at them like, I thought I was crazy. No, they're crazy. And but it's very sad. I mean, it's hard to go into the. I mean, I can't even remember. Someone asked me, like my shrink, he asked me how many times I was hospitalized, and I kind of forget. I don't.
My first wife went in for med adjustments. I can't tell you how many times. I have an intimate knowledge. Oh, it's been 20 years, so some of these places have closed or moved. But at 20 years ago, I had an intimate knowledge of the Portland metro areas, of the places where they would take someone for a med adjustment, the lockdown.
Yeah.
There's some of them were just little. You drove by and wouldn't even know that that's what they were. I mean, they don't advertise it, And the one that she went to a lot was on Main Street here in Vancouver, and I guess they've closed that down. It was on the top floor. And security was pretty sketchy there. She escaped once and was on her way home with nothing but a blanket wrapped around her.
Oh my God.
And I was coming to visit her, and I found her on the street corner, and I took her back, and I'm like, guys, somebody left the door open or something, man.
The fire alarm. But yeah, actually, I was just recently asked by my doctor if I wanted to go inpatient. I just pulled out of a manic episode. Like for the last, I probably thought it was like a mild manic episode for a year. I'm thinking going back.
And you function?
I was functional, but I wasn't that much fun. I'll tell you, I was just ornery and agitated, and I was getting upset. I was like getting paranoid, thought people were out to get me. I couldn't get out of bed in the morning because I was just abject, just fear gripped me. It's been going on well, but it got by me. I mean, I'm 52 years old, right? Maybe 53, I can't remember. But it still got by me. It gets by every single time. I mean, I think why it got by me this time is I just don't drink and drug anymore. And so back in the day, man,
you would have been off and running.
Woo. you know.
That's how you combated it.
Yeah, and but so, but I was like, the reason I didn't go in is like, one, I didn't think I was a risk to myself. I wasn't a risk to others. And the thing is, when it comes to trying to heal from something, it's nice to have the people you love around you. I remember the first date I had with my current wife. I told her I was bipolar. But it turns out she had a couple of bipolar husbands already. So she had to consider whether she wanted to go through this again. But I don't know. It's hard. But you know what it is? I tell you one thing you realize that other people don't. If there is a gift to being biochemically unstable, is you realize just how subjective reality is. People seem to think that what's real is real, And it's not. I guess you can drop acid and get that same message, but
Microdosing.
yeah, really. Oh my God, you don't get good acid anymore. But
as opposed to the bad acid.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bad part, the funky part is that I know exactly what you're talking about. Because like I was telling you before we started, late 70s, man, I was rocking it with real hippies.
Oh yeah, the real stuff. Yeah, so stuff where your lips don't turn blue. That kind of acid.
That stuff was whacked.
Strychnine.
Oh man, my lord. Ate acid and worked at the cannery. Worked a 12-hour shift at the cannery.
Oh man, acid stories. Yeah, when I took acid in college, that's where they were, over in Ellensburg, Central Washington University. I mean, first thing we do, we drop some acid and then take our Doc Martens and double knot them, because you're going for a walk,
Going to go see what's up.
You always go to, if I don't know how it was, but you always go to the highest point in town, In this case, that's where the water tower's at, right? We'd go up there and just watch the spray paint just crawl. Spray paint that was on the water tower. Just, we used to look down on a trailer park that's at the bottom of the hill, We're convinced that, evil lives there for sure, You sit there and just ponder the meaning of life while staying at a trailer park up, 200 feet up in the air, looking down. Yeah, but
I quit eating acid because it just became and this was in the late 80s, so it was a totally, like we were just talking about, a totally different kind of acid by that time. It just became a 4 to 6 hour experiment in terror.
Okay.
I mean, for me, it was just no longer...
Well, at some point, there's nothing left to learn, Like that first acid trip, maybe 2, you kind of realize, oh my God, we're all love, and light, stuff like that. And so, and that's a wonderful gift to be kind of, you say, shown briefly for a window, just the perfect totality of the universe and where you fit into it. And then, of course, the drug wears off, and you kind of, what was it about a banana fitting in its skin? I can't remember.
Yeah.
But then it's just like revisiting the same thing, It's like the same pageantry.
It just became bad for me, and then we just switched over to mushrooms.
Oh yeah.
Late 80s, I did a lot of mushrooms.
Less of an edge,
You could drink beer, a lot of beer, on mushrooms, and that's what I wanted to do. Same thing with meth. You said that the meth kind of curbed your appetite for alcohol.
Oh yeah.
It's quite the opposite with me.
Other people say that too.
I could pound it.
I just couldn't drink it. I mean, a beer would get stale in my hands,
Not me. I was sitting in a house with one of my running buddies, and he was not an alcoholic, but he was a serious meth head, and watching me pound these beers down, he's like, dude, that stuff's not even going to touch you. You're not going to get drunk. And I said, yeah, but drinking is what I do.
Yeah.
We're not going to sleep for the next 3 days. What am I going to do for 3 days? I drink. That's what I do. And then he'd go out and take his dashboard out of his car for no apparent reason,
Oh yeah, to be sure.
I mean, it's like, see, I drink. You do DIY projects.
I know. It's like they'll take absolutely everything apart. And just flailed all over the ground.
And then I'd leave because it's like, no, you're just going to bring heat down on all of us. I can't stick with you.
Oh, I know.
It's like this shit-faced guy at the bar telling the guy next to him, well, don't make a scene. That was me, I'm like, I got to get out of here. You're attracting attention,
Oh, no. I was like, yeah, I remember. It's just a crazy people to hang out with. Like people that before meth, you wouldn't let anywhere near you, are now like, sleeping on your couch. And they're insane. It's like, reality, what reality is, just gets farther and farther away. I definitely thought, when I was on the streets doing meth, that if I didn't, there are people, that, would have got killed for less, than what they did to me or stuff like that. And I never did. I considered myself, or at least romanticized myself as quite, loving, gentle person, But I think if I was out there for another year on meth, I could. My humanity.
Stone cold killer.
Yeah. My humanity would have been stripped away enough to where I wouldn't. And that's scary to think about. It's like that's how the drug changes you over time. Just consistently using it all the time. Where it's one thing if you just like do a binge or something like that and then come back to the reality and hold it down for a while. But after a while, you forget what reality was, because once again, like we're talking about, reality is very subjective. And, if you have basically a drug-induced daily
psychosis,
yeah. Yeah, like my wife, she really went into psychosis. I never went into psychosis, but, I'm sure I was just crazy as fuck in my own way. But, I'd have to chase her through the streets. I couldn't get too close because she'd start screaming, help, help, he's trying to kill me. But, if I got too far away and she got away from me, I wouldn't see her for a day. God knows what happened to her then, And,
so from your perspective in mental health, there is such a thing as drug-induced psychosis.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because I thought there was, and then a lot of people have told me that have agreed with me, and then there are some people that have sheepskins on their walls that tell me, no, that's BS.
Oh, no. Well, it's weird,
A minority, not a lot of them.
Yeah, well, like, I didn't go into psychosis, believe me, I raged and revved up pretty hot, but, people do, and particularly with meth, maybe not at first, but once you go into psychosis on meth, you will always go into psychosis on meth.
Every time?
Every time, yeah, every time. And they keep doing meth thinking, well, it won't be as crazy as last time, but it is, And I think it had a lot to do with, like, how good your meth is, how stepped on it is, but...
Well, you would crash eventually, right? Even out on the street, eventually you got to sleep. Your body will just shut down.
I was able to sleep on meth.
Oh.
And that's probably what saved me, actually. I could go 2 days without sleep.
Yeah.
Day 3, I was sleeping, whether I took meth or not, And, but I just, like, I heard it said, and I think it's probably right, that about 3 out of 10 males go into psychosis on meth, but about 7 to 8 out of 10 women. Women go into psychosis much more common for women to go into psychosis on meth than men.
And I just had that disagreement with somebody who, like me, is their knowledge comes from having used meth. A female I was talking to, and I said it affects women differently than it does men. I said even in the flailing, I said women flail, men don't flail. She said, well, men flail, and I said, you might have seen some men flail, but I mean,
car.
well, it takes them 15 minutes to get out of the car once they put it in park. What is that thing? The slowest thing in the world is a meth monster in a hurry.
Yeah, tweaker in a hurry.
But it affects, and the big book says alcohol affects women differently than it does men.
It does. Well, I guess men have an extra enzyme that helps them metabolize it.
Deal with it?
Metabolize it better, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, alcohol definitely kicks women's ass a lot faster than it does men's. I mean, it just destroys them,
And meth, I know, it takes, it seems like women that are got clean, it takes a period of years for some of them. I see them in the rooms that I believe they have their time that they're claiming, but they're still twitchy.
Yeah.
And
sometimes people don't come back. I had a buddy. I think Adderall was his thing, but definitely meth. And he'd be like pointing. When he went, and like he says, "You see those people in the trees over there?" And I'd look, the treeple, right? And like, no, I don't see him. Oh yeah, there they are. I see it. Anyway, he just went getting worse and worse and worse. He like freaked out his parents. He had to be hospitalized once, but he never really ever came back. I heard it said, and perhaps it's just a romanticizing the situation, but that if you don't, you have to want to come back from the psychosis. But some people, they just stay there, insisting that what they believe, the crazy that they believe, is just damn if it ain't true. And and there seems to be an ego around it, and probably all use has a certain ego around it, where it's like, where it tries to protect itself. And he insisted, that his view of his parents and all that stuff, the sheriff, of course, was always out to get him. In fact, he actually painted fuck you on the top of his roof of his house, for when the sheriff guy,
for the helicopter.
Yeah, he never quite came back, but oh my god.
Do you know where he's at?
Yeah, he's living out of his truck. Last I checked, doing odd landscaping jobs.
I've got a buddy that's. I don't know if he's. I mean, I met him in the program, and I knew his dad. His dad had long-term recovery, and same thing. He lives out of his pickup, and he accesses mental health resources and whatnot, but he's still just. Yeah,
sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's permanent.
I mean, sometimes, and I love this guy. I love him. Whenever I see him, I'm glad to see him. Unless there's been a couple of instances where it's like I see him at the end of the aisle at the grocery store, and it's like, okay, well, I'm not approaching that, because he's really ramped up. But he just, like you said, sometimes they don't come back.
Yeah, and it's weird psychosis, mass psychosis too. It's like it evolves too as a community. I mean, like it used to be like treeple, right? People live in trees, And then when people were in psychosis of meth, like when I was out living on the street, they'd see like shapeshifters, people that shape. And then there's the shadow walkers, right? They would go in, and now it's giants for some reason. At least the last time I checked, because I was working, in basically a late night detox, so I'd get reports from the fringe,
From the front line.
Yeah, what's going on out there? I guess the big one now is giants. And I go, what do these giants look like? And I'd be like, oh, they're about 10 foot tall. They're really skinny, and they don't say anything. They just kind of stand there and survey.
I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I have a theory about how thin the veil is, and that there's definitely more than what we see.
That's what they believe too. It's just not that they're crazy. They just think, no, I can see it now. Like my wife, she ran a fever, probably from a dirty needle, got an infection. Not only was she high as fuck, but she was also, quickly, to the point where I did take her to the hospital, but she said she saw a little green man jump out of the trees, glowing green, and run across the freaking lawn. And then 3 or 4 little gnome people then jumped and chased him around the corner, right? And she told me that. I'm like, oh, what the fuck are you? Because but damn, when I was working that detox one night, a guy came in and I told him the same story, about the green man. He's like, oh yeah, the little green man. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? He goes, no. There's actually now he told me there's like a man cover or a metal plaque about the green man in Portland. I guess this is a part of the folklore down there about some little green guy that runs around. It's always the same things. It's like there's like 4 or 5 psychosis stuff. One is like soma, something to do with the body, like things crawling around. So paranoia, the big one's always jealousy, where you think your partner's cheating on you. That's a huge one. That's usually what leads to most real problems with meth and relationships.
Like violence.
Yeah. Paranoia, think someone's trying to kill you or something like that, or people like gang stalking. You ever hear about this? God. Gang stalking is one right now where you think there's basically a bunch of people that don't really know you at all, or if they know you at all, decide they band together and make your fucking life miserable. And so like they'll change your laundry from one thing to another. It's like, oh yeah, I'm being stalked by a gang of strangers. It's a thing, man, and like a lot of people have it. It's like, and the thing about psychosis, you'll never be able to talk them out of it. Because it's like, because even if you try to talk them out of whatever psychosis is going on, then you're in on it. It's like.
But so different forms of psychosis trend? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, how does that happen?
I don't know. Maybe it's like those monkeys living on 2 different islands kind of shit, Or
do they get together and compare notes?
I don't know. It is
and,
odd.
And once you hear something, it gets stuck in your head sideways. And
what that gets in their head, like I'm saying, every single time they're going to do meth, they'll be off of the races again, But we're thinking, do something. There's a paranoia one. There's a jealousy one. There's a where you think you're God or somehow in touch with a higher power, directly acting within that one. There was that one, and then again that the people aren't what they actually seem to be. Like that isn't my father. That's an imposter. And you can show them genetic proof. They still. Trying to talk someone out of psychosis is just I mean, you're wasting time, and you're only going to agitate him.
I talked to my son before I came here and to ask him if I could talk about this. And my son's such a better man than I'll ever be. He's 22 years old. He was diagnosed. He began presenting as schizophrenic about 2 years ago. He was 20.
It's about right. That's what happened.
And he was and you've met him at.
Mm-hmm. He's a very nice guy.
Yeah.
But he definitely seems private.
He's different.
Yeah, he's private.
Well, he's autistic.
Oh, is that too?
Yeah. But he didn't. When it came to a head, when he finally had to go in for the 72 hours, the point where it's like, we're gonna have to. And fortunately, his dad happens to be a guy that lived with a schizoaffective woman. So I don't know what anybody else would have like. What the fuck's going on with this guy?
Yeah, you don't know at first, man.
Well, and even I didn't. Well, I probably didn't want to cop to it.
Yeah, it sneaks up. It just sneaks up on you, Yeah.
But he didn't recognize me. He and my sister, or his sister, my daughter. I called her and her husband over, and they came over, and he told them, "That's not my dad. I don't know who the fuck this guy is or why he's in the house." And he was carrying a bat around with him, and I'm like, "Yeah." And he's a pretty good sized boy, and how it came to a head was that finally the cops don't. It's hard to get a response from the authorities.
They usually just think
you have to wait till he brains you, and then we'll arrest him for braining you.
Yeah.
But just threatening to brain you? No, he hasn't done it yet. It was different from with my first wife was that because he was of age, I was just some guy to them. They were like, at about 48 hours, they finally called and said, he's calmed down and you can come see him. And they had him in a room about the size of your average bathroom, really. And they were talking about sending him to Spokane. It's always Spokane. We're going to send treatment's the same thing. We're going to bed for you in Spokane. Why is the only place you can go is Spokane? But they said that, and I said, why would you send him there so far away from his family? And I got a little heated with him, and the psychiatrist, the hospital psychiatrist, told me, she goes, I don't even have to talk to you. Your take on it doesn't matter at all. We can do what we want with him.
Really?
And but then 12, and it became even more heated. And about 12 hours later, earlier than the 72-hour hold, they called me and they said, just come get him. It was like they just lost interest.
Yeah, it wasn't a risk anymore.
Yeah.
I have to admit, because often mental illness, it just looks like drug use, And so, man, our emergency rooms and stuff like that prejudice against drug use. It's like they resent you for taking a bed that could be, given to someone who's.
And they're busy. They got it going on there. But yeah, it's part of the job. Crisis is crisis. And I told you I was going to try to touch on this. What I've seen with my first wife. Some people some medical professionals are very compassionate, but then some are just terrible to people with mental health issues.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like they get in compassion fatigue, I guess they call it, for lack of any better understanding of it. And I get that. I mean, I've had to take some time off.
There's a high burnout rate in your field.
Yeah, there is, sure. I mean, well, and think of it too, having, as a peer counselor, I have a lot of pedigrees, mental illness, alcoholism, drug addiction, homelessness, trouble with the law, although it's never like that's actually one thing I'm missing, the one last little badge on my vest, like, I was in prison,
You never went to prison?
No.
Well, there's always tomorrow.
Well, the thing is like, I was really good at walking through that. I'm an upper middle class white kid of a lawyer, So when I get messed up with the legal, I was arrested 3 times and got off every single time.
All I ever did was county time. I had an option. I thought I was going to prison once, and there was a mix-up. The only reason I didn't is there was a mix-up.
Paperwork?
Yeah. Back in the day when it wasn't on computers, it was on papers. And a paralegal quit the prosecuting attorney's office, and as a final fuck you on the way out the door, took a bunch of files with him.
What?
And my attorney finally got it to a point where it's like, Your Honor, we've been waiting 6 months. And they said, well,
Right to a speedy trial.
we'll just credit for time served. When it was assault, too. You never been to prison?
No, I'm never in prison.
And I was trying not to look down on you for it.
I got taken down outside Sportsman's Warehouse here in Vancouver. Was the last one. They tackled me in the parking lot, and you really don't want to resist, right? Because then it's not just like theft 3; it's just like burglary then, you know. And I remember when the cop came, he saw the track marks on my arm, shooting up, snapping meth all the time because he suggested that perhaps I needed some help, But he actually, oddly enough, the police officer took some pity on me, He didn't take me in because there wasn't any room at the inn, But he, on that particular one, on that theft 3, I got a guy named Angus Lee. He's an attorney here in Vancouver. He's great. And I paid him, but it was like, I can't remember, it was $6,000 to have him take the case, which my father paid. And he went to the Sportsman's Warehouse, and I guess he goes, come on, man, he's a drug addict, homeless. Cut the guy a break. Like, no, we're not going to do it. He goes, how much was it that he stole? It was a backpack I stole. And he goes, well, like, I don't know, what, $170? Anyway, Angus pulled out his wallet, laid down like $300, something like that, and goes, this is what we done here? I mean, there you go. And they dropped it. I got not guilty. Now, that's the difference between hiring a lawyer and having a public
defender.
Yeah. It's about getting it done or not getting it done, but
Yeah, on that assault, too, where it looked like I was going to go to the joint, my brother hired me an attorney. He said, you don't want to go to the joint. You don't want to, because I'd always been in county. That's all I'd ever done. What I call county raised, but not state bred. And yeah, so the real attorney got me that, and the good fortune of the paperwork disappearing. So I don't have any felonies on me, which is nice. In the regular world, it's not. It's nice to not have any felonies on you. It can be pretty debilitating having felonies.
Yeah, you don't get a job, you can't find a place to live.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of your clients are living on the street?
Yeah, all of them.
All of them?
Until we find a way to house them. Yeah.
Is that your job? Is so you specifically work with houseless people with mental health diagnosis?
Houselessness. Yeah.
Yeah. With diagnoses.
Oh, they all have a diagnosis. Yeah.
You work for a place though that deals exclusively with mental illness. Yeah. And I was a alumni of that place for a while.
Oh yeah. Yeah, me too. They put me back together when I got off the street. Just got me stable on meds
And I think that's where I got my diagnosis at finally. I'd been to a bunch of talk therapists, and none of them ever said, do you think you're depressed? And that's what this guy just asked a simple question. Do you think you might have depression? Because I do. And I was like, really? And that was the beginning. I wouldn't be sober if I still had unaddressed depression and anxiety. I'm positive. How are you going to live that way? Anyway, yeah, if I still had undiagnosed depression and anxiety, I wouldn't be sober. I can't successfully live that way.
Well, a lot of people don't realize a lot of times it looks like alcohol and drug abuse is actually self-medicating. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's what I was doing with self-medicating, but I'm also sure that I'm an alcoholic. There's too long of a strain of it in my family for it to be anything. Or we're all just crazy. I don't know which one.
Well, yes, there is. What I see certainly with people, and really it's only like 10% of the population I've heard, and I believe this, that actually are, let's say, alcoholic or have that substance use disorder, they call it.
Mm-hmm. And
it's a mental illness, they consider it, it's definitely a mental health diagnosis. But you just respond to it differently, A lot of people, like normies, it's like they would drink 1 or 2 drinks, they don't feel good, That's not the case for an alcoholic. Just drink.
It's not my reality.
Yeah, and so
I've only vomited from drinking twice in my entire career, and I drank a lot.
You can have the propensity to become an alcoholic, right? But then there has to be some sort of life event that kicks, where it becomes activated. It's not enough just to have it. But I mean, it could be something like that. Just growing up and being poor, and the trauma of that, or
Generational trauma.
generational trauma. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a real thing, they say, and I believe it. Yeah, I think that's right. But then there's always just me, who I don't think really came from. But I mean, obviously, trauma wasn't really part of my childhood. But I think to some extent, it was just traumatic being me. So,
Yeah, I'm hard work.
so what's the craziest relationship you had? Did you have any relationships where you and your partner were just using like crazy, or is this the one you mentioned?
I've always been. Caroline's in the program, but everyone that I've been with long term, or even whatever term, I'm more attracted to people that don't live the life that I lived. I guess apparently because they're either normies, or they like my daughter's mother. She had just quit drinking, so she was probably a particular kind of hard drinker. No, but all of them were volatile. All my relationships up to this one have been pretty volatile. This is the best relationship I've ever been in. I characterize it as the only healthy relationship I've ever been in, but then I also have to quantify that by saying that I don't really know what a healthy relationship looks like, so I'm just taking my word for it.
That has a lot to do with it, it's like when I got sober, this last time, I decided to put emphasis on character. I mean, to be a good man, But fortunately, I knew what that looked like. My father is a good man. He's ethical, he's honest, he's gentle. He's introspective. All the things you want a man to be, for God's sakes. But if you didn't have that if you didn't have like a mentor or something in your life, to emulate, to try to live up to, I mean, it'd be very hard. You can say you want to be a good man or live a good life, if you don't know what the fuck that is. I mean, it's hard. I would think I was fortunate, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
But you watched the good man, your dad, growing up,
yeah,
and still ended up on the streets,
so
on drugs, and
yeah.
So what? I don't know how do you
How do I account for that?
Yeah.
Well, I think there was a certain amount of ego run riot, as they say, but I think I was just bipolar.
Mental illness.
Yeah, mental illness. Yeah, and it manifested a lot. Like, it was easy to, as drug and alcohol use. I think it was looking back in hindsight, And the thing is, I was just unhappy, I just didn't like the way I felt when I was sober, It's like I just felt better on drugs and alcohol, And I could tolerate it. I had that, I could drink. I could drink,
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I didn't like when I was telling you the one time, the first time I ever got Demerol in the hospital. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I felt
Until you were comfortable.
Yeah, then it was like, yeah, and then that's kind of what really got me on the whole subsequent train of alcohol and drug use, was realizing that I could feel better, and up until that point, I was 18, 19, up to that point, you didn't never realize just how uncomfortable you were till you weren't. And then, like I said, it was just moderate, and with alcohol, it wouldn't get so bad, but then probably when you threw in a couple manic episodes or something like that, it would just, every manic episode was just a trail of just drug and alcohol. And then I'd go in for a week or so, they'd get me stable, but I still had a bad drinking habit,
As soon as you got out, huh?
Oh, yeah, so then I had to kick that, and yeah, I think this last time when I was just going, when I got off the streets, finally, I was in the hospital for diabetes, and I was done. I mean, they say, oh, I got sober because I was going to die, but no, I really was going to die. I was in a pretty bad way. But and people ask how, why, but I remember being in that tent, too weak to really get up. Was camped next to the freeway, here in Vancouver. And I saw my wife walking away to meet her mother, who she hadn't seen in like quite some time. We were starting to rekindle those relationships because pretty much. I mean, I was done. There's no more lies I could tell myself. No more stories I could maintain. For what I was doing out there. I mean, I was done, done. And I saw my wife walking over to the car, and I realized, people ask me, like, how to get sober? Why did I change? Why did I come in out of the cold? How did I get sober? And I realized, and love. I love my wife. You know, I loved her deeply enough and powerfully enough that I wanted to change.
Was she going to leave?
No, man, she would have followed me out into the. That's
Till the end, huh?
Yeah, that's the guilt I have too. Is like I don't know if it wasn't for me, would she have been addicted to drugs or homelessness? She loved me so much, she just followed me through all the horror, you know. But because I didn't love myself enough, that's for sure. I mean, people say, "Oh, you got to get sober for yourself." No, not really. You just have to actually care about something more than yourself, you know what you've been doing. But we got off the streets, and that's when the drinking started again, and it was worse. It's like they say in AA, you know, it's like it never stopped. I mean, oh my God, it was so bad. I mean, I'd start drinking, the thirst would just kick in, you know. Just lucky to be in just wreckage. I did that 2 or 3 times. I just ended up in the emergency room. And the last one, they then put me. Last time I said, you know, I told them I was suicidal. I don't think I was suicidal, but you know, Jesus, you know. I mean, you have to be suicidal to pick up that beer, you know. I mean, it's like drinking for me is a suicidal act. It's a suicide.
Me too.
Yeah, it's like I must not want to live, you know, because I'm like I get to the emergency room in 2 weeks, you know, drying on a Librium, you know, and I told them I was suicidal. They threw me in the back of this like cage car and drove me, which is a horrible thing to do to someone that's like suffering from a mental health crisis, you know. But I spent like I don't know 3 or 4 days inside the psych ward that they had here, but they brought in a peer. You know, and peers typically tend to be rather relatively simple folk, I think, you know. And as far as like, you know, there's not a lot of, you know, it's like people that have credentials and stuff like that, they tend to have a certain amount of tact, you know, that goes with it. But this guy, they called him in. They must have called him in, you know, because they knew I was drunk. And I sat in a little room with him, and he looked at me, and suddenly he just, I can't remember what we're talking about. He just like stood up straight, his eyes got wide, and goes, "You're a late stage alcoholic." You wouldn't think, but it seems like until he said that to me, he essentially diagnosed me in a way, you know. It's like I realized, oh my God, I'm not just an alcoholic anymore. I'm in the end run of this game, you know. I'm a late stage alcoholic, you know. And yeah, fuck if he wasn't right, but I mean, I stayed sober that time. And
so you guys got off the street, got into housing, and you started drinking.
Well, my parents put us up in a little trailer right across the street from a Safeway. And yeah, I started drinking, and then finally, couple bouts going into the emergency room 2-3 times, right. Cleaning up. And the last time, finally, in a psych ward, which actually they did. They gave me an antidepressant, you know, which then caused, of course, a manic episode. But either way, yeah. And we got first it was a trailer, and the trailer got smaller and smaller. We got fatter and fatter, you know, eating on a regular basis and all. And got to a bigger trailer, and then got to this apartment here, you know.
How long you been clean?
6-7 years. Yeah, going on 7.
Clean and sober both, or because you drank for a while after you got off the meth?
Yeah,
but
she got sober. She's sober about 6 months before me, I guess, you know. But you know, she can have a drink now and then. She just doesn't, I think, out of respect for me. I mean,
she's not an alcoholic.
You know, I don't think so. You know, but when we met each other, we were both just drinking tough. You know.
Well, you don't want to open that door even a crack.
Yeah, she doesn't miss it. You know.
Oh. Well, that tells me she may not be an alcoholic. I don't miss drinking. I really don't. I mean, there's things I miss about. There's things I miss, but drinking's not one of them. I mean, it's the days that I spent detoxing, at-home detox, chicken noodle soup and Gatorade.
Okay.
Afraid to leave the house, you know. And then trying to get somebody to go and get my first 40 ounces so that I can get ramped up and go back to life again. I don't miss that. I don't miss that at all.
Oh, yeah.
I'll never get those days back. Yeah. And the older I get and the less days I have in front of me, the more I don't resent the fact that, I mean, it took what it took, but I don't miss it. I don't miss drinking at all.
No. Well, I get to enjoy things so much more now. I mean, my wife just got back from Vegas, you know, and she stayed sober there, too. And like every time I'd go to Vegas, you know, I'd come back a broken man. Just broke, ashamed of myself. And it's like, but now it'd be nice to go someplace. I was like, yeah, you actually get to experience the things you do, you know. You know, I mean, and it's like I've missed out on so much because of my mental illness and drug drinking. You know, I remember even my first wife, you know, I was a half a bottle down, and, you know, I walked out the door kind of thing, but she was just crying, you know. She said, you know, I just wish, you know, I could spend the rest of my life with you, But to tell you the truth, I thought she'd be better off without me. Between all the trips to the psych wards and all the drug and alcohol use, and it's like, it wasn't really a romantic relationship anymore. She was a caretaker, a nurse, to me. And so there really just wasn't any intimacy in the relationship anymore. But still, I drank a long time over that first marriage. I was the first person to get a divorce in my family on either side, period. It was never done, And oddly enough, as enlightened as I consider my parents, they didn't quite know what to do. They're angry, they're mad, I get it.
I was pretty devastated by my first divorce.
I drank a long time over that.
Not because it was like everybody in my family had a divorce. It was just that when I got married the first time, it never entered my mind that I wouldn't be with this person forever. Looking back, I realized I don't know why I thought that, because we got married for all the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
She needed somebody to take care of her, and I needed somebody to take care of, But I was pretty devastated. My second divorce, kind of rolled with it. I'm sorry, it was bad, and I'm sorry that happened, but yeah, I wasn't devastated. It was more like, okay, well, this is how it happens.
Well, I come from marriage stock, Now, my first marriage, we were together like 20 years. It's a good run.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never been together that long with anybody.
And my wife and I now are 13 years, going on 13 years. Yeah. Man, it's amazing we're still together. Going through homelessness and drug addiction, alcoholism.
Yeah, it is. And you build a really good life.
It is. It's not so bad, I wish I just had more gratitude,
You want more?
I do. Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting more.
Well, as long as it doesn't mean you're dissatisfied with what you have, I suppose,
Yeah, if you can see what you got but still want more.
Well, I always expected I'd be more in my life. I had big plans for my life, It's like I was going to be...
You, me, and Bill W., all three of us,
I was
man.
going to be a rock star, for God's
Captains
sake.
of industry, man.
Yeah, and it's hard to, and now, like, what I'm doing, it's like, if you truly feel that you were meant for more, the better you are at something that you didn't think, you're more and more of a failure in a way, as you can be really good at other things, but it's like, I always wanted to be extraordinary, and I can't remember who I heard. It's like, I had a sensation that maybe it's not about being extraordinary or even ordinary, but just to be an extraordinary, ordinary man, You can still be something magnificent, even if it has a certain humble resonance, And so it's kind of what I'm going for now.
Just to be satisfied.
Yeah.
And still strive, but just be satisfied.
Well, yeah, and you think it's true. It's like all the things you wanted to do, you want to be a benefit to others, wanted to, love and be loved, all those things perhaps are easier in an ordinary setting,
I'm not. This last 3 years has burned me down pretty far financially. I still have a house that me and the bank own and like quite a little bit. Still got my ground to work, but and I hate this phrase. I'm pretty happy with who I am. I like myself a lot more than I did 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, I was, 12, 13 years sober. And I wasn't anywhere near a relapse or anything like that. But I didn't like who I was and didn't even realize who I was. Because, again, it comes back to whatever you're accustomed to is what normal is. And 3 years ago, I was a hard-driving guy at my job. I'd been there, 8 years. Very confrontational. It was a job that encouraged confrontation. You fought for every inch of territory you had, And when I left that, my first job offer came in 2.5 hours after I left my last job, and I turned it down because I wanted to do something else. And I chased an app for 3 years, making deliveries, and on the days when I had made enough money and felt like it, I would go home and be with my son. And then Caroline came along, and now we have a relationship, and I'm very happy with what's happened the last 3 years. And if I lose everything financially because of it, oh, well, I wouldn't want to be that guy I was 3 years ago. And nobody looked at me and thought this guy's, I mean, they may have had an opinion about how tightly I was wound, outside of work. But I didn't like who I was, and I didn't even realize I didn't like who I was until I found a way to change it.
When did you start liking who you were? What was it?
About, relatively, fairly recently, about a year and a half. I left, like I say, I left my job 3 years ago. Just walked away from it. I was like, I've had enough. I've given you guys notice 3 times, and it just keeps happening. So I'm done giving notice. And left, and I think it took. I mean, a year and a half afterward, I was still, fucking twitchy. Ready to fight for every inch of territory, and I've slowly realized that there was no more territory to fight for. I'm just doing what I do now, I have a perspective that I didn't have 3 years ago. I have compassion. I mean, my take on the people that I see on the street has changed drastically in the last 3 years. My relationship with my son has changed drastically. My son was approaching the place where he didn't want to see me come home from work. I know. And I've talked to other people that left that same situation, that same job, that were in the same situation as I was, pounding on table and meetings, you're not going to do this to my department, we're going to do that to your department, blah, 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 blah. And they tell me the same thing, one guy that they finally fired him, and he was the head of transportation at this place. He had 100 guys working under him, and it took 2 weeks before his son came to him and said, I like you better not working there.
I know, I think maybe it's less for the generations like millennials and Gen Zs and such, but I think you and I come from a time where there were certain expectations of what a man was,
Yeah.
And working was one of them.
Yeah.
You really define, it's like, I think people like you, me, and others too, you found yourself, if I ask you, why did I not chase my dreams? Because I was afraid of not being able to support a family. I felt a cultural, or whatever. I felt that my worth was based entirely upon my earning potential. And so I just didn't kind of run after the stuff that might more and more dreams, chase dreams, because it felt irresponsible, I think.
Had to be a reason for everything you did.
Yeah, it's like, but to tell you the truth, I think reason why I was never successful at the things I wanted to be is because people just didn't like me that much.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well, the right people liked me. Like at that job I was at, they liked me. They'd set me up and let me go knock them down, But yeah, you're not very likable when hard-bitten, driven man is exhausting to the people around him. Like I said, though, you spend the age group that we're in, men. We don't do things unless there's a reason for doing them. So this podcast thing, why are you doing it?
Because I think I have a story to tell.
And you want to tell it.
Yeah, I want to tell it. What do you say, Ernie? You want to wrap her up?
I do.
All right.
I appreciate your time, buddy.
Oh, Ernie, you've been such a treat. Thank you so much.
I could feel us winding down, so
Yeah,
I was going to figure out a way to say it too.
It's not like we can't come back.
Oh yeah, I'm good, man. And I really like the fact that so far this is the best podcast you've ever had.
Yeah, it is. It is serious.
All right.
Thank you for listening to my podcast today and my discussion with Ernie Grindle. My name is Matthew DePere. I hope you join us again.